is BUB'S Comics coming at you. I am going to be showing just 2 books today. And the reason that I chose to do this format here as opposed to my usual format over here where I show off the books kind of off and I'm off camera is because they're too big to put in the camera. So I've always struggled with how to get the whole, like a whole slab in the camera frame in the setup that I have. And then also my treasury books and some of my magazine books are just too big, original art. A lot of it becomes too big to put in the frame. And so I end up, doing this and trying to get it just right, and the glare hits. So in order to make that easier on myself, I'm probably going to go on camera for things like CGC hauls, anything that's larger than my normal comic size frame that I use. So that's what I'll be doing today. So first off, we have a big treasury to show. Here is Limited Collector's Edition presents Superman. I'll show that to you. Look at that. That's pretty awesome. I love these treasuries. I'm a big fan of them. I think that they look great. Oh, look at that. Now this is one that I did not have, of course, before. But not only that, but the guy I bought it from, he had 2 of them. One was in probably 50% better shape than this one. So it didn't have all these kind of cracks along here and stuff. But these treasuries, I kind of buy them as rough as I can get them because I think that it adds to the charm of them. And I love buying them in person. The reason that I like my treasury collection to be purchased in person is because these things are impossible to ship. They're so big, they're so heavy, they're so floppy that they just don't ship well. So if I look at them online, if I look to buy them online, they inevitably show up in worse condition than I thought they were. Now you can argue about it. You can say, well, you want a slab copy, whatever. But these treasuries are very difficult to ship, and people will say, oh, I ship it perfect, and I know how to ship a treasury. Let me tell you something. Even when you think you know how to ship it, unless you're putting this between like 2 planks of wood, there's going to be some play in the box that are so heavy. And it's not like shipping a slab that you can just wrap and bubble wrap until it's like a freaking football. You can't do that with these because it'll bend, because they're very soft. So I'm aware that they make top loaders for these. So my hope and goal is to get some life-size magazine top loaders for these, and I'd like to display them on my shelf. Now, most of you know that I have a 3,000 hard comic limit. So the reason that I have a 3,000 hard comic limit is because my storage container, my file cabinet, will only comfortably hold 3,000. Actually, it will only uncomfortably hold 3,000 comics. Really, if I'm going to be comfortable, it should be somewhere around 2,700 to give room to move and flip through the books. So these don't count towards that limit. So any of the books that are treasury size, anything that's slabbed, anything magazine sized, some of the Golden Age books don't count for that because they're a little too big than the cabinet can hold. So some of the Golden Age books that are sized like Silver Age books or slightly larger will fit in the boxes, but the ones that are like true Golden Age size, they don't fit. So those kind of don't count in my 3,000 limit. Or they do, but they don't count for what I'm sticking in the cabinet. So there you go. Superman Limited Collector's Edition presents Superman. If you're looking for this, you can't. It's not actually titled as a treasury. It just says Limited Collector's Edition. So if you're looking for this book, that's how you're going to have to search for it. So awesome Superman there. Kind of reminds me of George Reeves. So pretty cool. Love it. Next we have the big book for the haul, and it is The Tick Special Edition #1. You all see that? Look at that. So here's a story on The Tick Special Edition #1. For those of you who don't know, and I know that there's many of you who don't know. So The Tick was a cartoon in the 90s, but before that it was actually New England Comic Shop had kind of a newsletter that they put out. So, well, let's even go before that. The owner of New England Comic Shop's walking through one of his many locations, right? And he comes into one of the shops and he's like, oh, wow, that's cool. And there's a little, like a fan-made art that's on the wall that says The Tick, right? and it was a cruder drawing of the tick's face and upper bust. So the owner of the comic shop liked that, and he's like, you know what? We've been wanting to do a character. We thought about putting out a book with a character, and we hadn't picked a character to represent the shop yet. So I think I like the tick. So he contacted the creator, Ben Edlund. So he contacted the creator, Ben Edlund, and he said, I want you to work on something for me. And this was ultimately the production of that. He had done some newsletters for them, some, I think 3 New England Comics newsletter, number 14, 15, and 16, all have appearances of the tick prior to this. But they're not real stories, they're just kind of appearances, little snippets, short panels, 1 panels in some case. So this is the first true appearance of the tick in comics, and CGC does notate that as being the first appearance of tick in comics. So what happens is that a lot of people will show a book that looks almost exactly like this, but it'll have a black background or a red back. The black one's the most common one. There'll be a black background, red background, yellow. I think there's a blue one and a green one. Those are all later printings. But the key between this one and the black one is that this one says down here, Special Edition number 1. Special Edition number 1 is the first appearance of the tick. The black one is just tick number 1. It basically reprints Special Edition number 1, changing just some minor things, and then some of the interior stories as far as like the letters page and things like that, letter from the editor, those things are changed as well. But there is a Special Edition number 1, which this is, and this one is, there's only 5,000 of this book in existence. This one is number 4,837. So there's 5,000 of these that existed, and the way that it worked is that you contacted New England Comic Shop, you sent in something like an order form, and they would reserve you a copy of tick number 1. Well then, not telling anyone, instead of sending out tick number 1, which they had not even finished producing yet, they sent out tick Special Edition number 1 instead, limited to 5,000 copies. Then it was also offered that if anyone, there were copies left over because not 5,000 people had ordered the book. And if anyone wanted this version of it, after they were aware of what it was, they could order it specifically. And again, only 5,000 run. There's also a tick Special Edition number 2, which completes the story that started in this book. And it is, I think only 3,000 copies of that book were made. So that one's actually more rare than this one, but of course this being the first appearance and with that killer cover and the white background is what you're looking for. You're looking for the white background and for it to say Tick Special or Special Edition number 1. A lot of people have shown the black background one and said that it was the first appearance of the Tick. But if you notice, if they have a CGC copy, it will not say first appearance of the Tick. It also, where most books will say first appearance and origin, the Tick does not have an origin. And in nowhere does it say first appearance and origin of the Tick, because he doesn't have one. He just shows up in the story. He's already a superhero. Someone at one point says, oh, I like the costume. He's like, what costume? So, so he's just a superhero. He's kind of like a born superhero, and that's the way it is. So there's no real origin to the Tick. The first page in here, the Tick is in a mental asylum, and he decides that he's bored being in the nut house, and so he escapes, or he breaks out. And that's it. So that's the origin of the Tick. They also have a great back pinup of all the characters in the Tick, in the early Tick stories. So hopefully that's coming through pretty cool there. So great back pinup, and I think this is also present on Tick number 1 if you're able to get that. So some more things about this book. One is that there's only 5,000 of them, $1.50 price tag originally. This is one of those books that I put in the same league as Rifleman number 10. And the reason that I put it in the Rifleman number 10 grouping in my collection is because a Rifleman number 10, if you go to, which I've shown that in my top 10 haul. So if you see my top 10 video, you've seen my Rifleman number 10. I won't show it again right now. But the reason that I put it in the same group is because that Rifleman number 10 If you try to get a buy it now, or if you see it in the wild, that book's going to run you $350 plus. It's a novelty book. People like it. It's really cool. It's a great conversation piece. And when people see it in my collection, it always gets a fun look. That it's fun to watch people like, what's going on with that book, right? But it's a very expensive book to me for a novelty book. One of the most expensive novelty books out there. But this book here is one of those books that if you go to buy this book now, it's going to be $500. $350 for a low grade, $500 for mid grade, and it can be up in crazy numbers beyond that. You know, $1,000 if somebody thinks they have a 9.8 on their hands. And there's only about 174 of them on the census. Now again, that does not mean, you know, whenever I say the census, the CGC census, I always preface that by saying that there is not always accurate numbers on the census. A lot of people will attest to that the census kind of has, you know, if you crack a book out and then resubmit it, you know, you clean it, press it, and resubmit it, it's going to get another number added to the census, and all of a sudden you'll be looking at, you know, 175 books. And let me tell you, that might happen to this book. So here's what happened with my book. Oh, so to finish off on the eBay point, when people are looking to buy this book, if you wait to buy it now, you're going to spend a ton of money. They're so expensive. But in auction, there's actually not a lot of demand for this book. Not a lot of people are setting back $300-400 waiting for this book to go up in auction and get it at a deal. So it would appear. So whenever this book sells low, it sells in auction. The same thing goes for the Rifleman number 10. Don't waste your, unless you see a buy it now that was posted 10 minutes ago and it's at the price you want to pay, don't bother. Wait for one to come up for auction, and eventually they do, like all things. And when it comes up for auction, bid. And you're almost guaranteed to get it at a mere fraction of the cost. I bought this book shipped and all for under $100. You can't get, when people are like, oh, I see that book all the time for $65-75. That's the black background one, the one that is not the first appearance of the Tick. The one that's a reprint of this book has the black background. So when you see this book sell for under $100, it's usually that book. Buying this book, and the 6.5, by the way, there's only two 6.5s in the census, and they're both the lowest graded on the census. Now, when I bought this book, which you won't see it now, and I'll tell you why, there was a black smudge right there, big black smudge. I mean, like, probably a silver dollar size black smudge. I was like, what is that? Looks like somebody took a tennis ball, dipped it in ink, and pressed it on the book. Corresponding smudges were on the back, along this edge of the book, the outside from the bind edge. So the quick story on that is that, and also the bottom of this case was kind of open. There was it wasn't completely, it wasn't cracked or anything. You could tell it was still intact. I wasn't suspecting any foul play in any way whatsoever. But this case had kind of separated right there and had a small gap. The book was very wavy inside. So it had dirt on front and back cover, and the book was very wavy. And it wasn't a water wave. It was very odd. I think that after slabbing this book, either CGC didn't do a good job slabbing the book, and you know, I've had my complaints about their quality control before, but the bottom was kind of popped open, and the book was spread open. There was air getting to the book. And you say, well, what are you talking about? There's got to be an inner well. Well, with a book this size, and this is a new CGC case, so I'm tempted to believe that this has been, you know, slabbed in the last couple of years at least. There was no inner well with this book. And you say, well, how can that be? That's not right. It's probably not right. Well, because there's not enough room. The book is so big, it's about Golden Age size. And this is a regular size case. So there's just not enough room in there to fit an inner well. So what they did was they took two like thick pieces of Mylar and they put it on the back and they put it on the front, and they just sandwiched the book in the case. And there was a little bit of Newton ring action going on too when I first got it. So I don't care about a slab book. I love the way the CGC cases look, but this is not a book I need to preserve that hard. So I cracked the slab. So I cracked it, and you can see along that edge right there, there's some cracking, some evidence of cracking. Also, you can see big evidence right there where I cracked it. You can kind of see that wave right there. So big crack there. And I opened it from the side. So I usually when I crack a slab, I try not to crack, like break it with a hammer. I've seen people do that. I'll try and preserve the case as much as I can. Popped open the edges, slid the book out, and I cleaned it. First I read it, which was fantastic. A great read. Get this one or the reprint black copy, whatever. It's a great read. Really fun story. Very, very good book. I can see why it was instantaneously popular. So I read the book. Well, upon reading the book, I noticed when I was done, there were more black smudges. I was like, what the hell's going on? Well, it turns out the interior of the book is written in newsprint. It's a newsprint pages, and it's all black and white. So those are fingerprints that from turning the pages and then touching the cover. So that's what was going on. So when I was done, it was actually more dirty than when I first pulled it out. So I cleaned it, of course. You know, I've got a press and I do my own cleaning. So I cleaned it, pressed it, and got all those waves out, and it's super sharp now. Now it has a little bit of rust on the staple here, and both staples have a little bit of rust. So that stinks. So that's always going to hold the book down as far as grade goes. And I've never sent in a book with rusty staples to be graded. So I don't know what that would do to it. But we know that it already had rust when they graded it earlier at a 6.5. So we know that probably, I would say the clean and press brought it up at least a grade. I would say it's easily a 7.5. But I would say that without the rust, that this book has brought it up. That cleaning and pressing for this book has brought the grade up to whatever the highest grade for a book with a rusty staple could be, because it is perfect, super flat and super clean. So I like white backgrounds; they clean up nice. So there you go. And the back cover had all kinds of smudges. Got that cleaned up. So anyway, there you go. Tick number one, special edition number one, cracked. And then I use satin scotch tape with satin finish. And the reason that I use a satin finish is because it doesn't give off kind of a glare and it won't yellow too fast. So when I'm recasing slabs or covering or closing them back up, I'll use that satin finish tape because it kind of has a haze to it and it blurs a little bit of the crack lines in there to where it kind of doesn't look too bad. So, and of course from front face value you can't tell at all that it's been cracked. So there you go. And I sealed the bottom up properly so we won't have any more air getting in there. And that's what I believe happened to this book. I believe that some air got into this book and was with the condensation and the heat and the moisture, because it wasn't getting, all this was very tight still. But right up the center was a chamber of air getting into the book. And that was causing condensation, and I believe it waved the book after it was slabbed. And that's one of the things that I have been harping on when it comes to any slab surface, doesn't matter who they are. At some point, right now this pretty slabs and all this is still kind of I think a relatively new thing when you talk about the 160 something years of the hobby. But when you consider that every slab is not perfect, at some point people are going to have to get back to buying the book and not the grade. So you could buy the 6.5 grade and I still paid well under what the 6.5 grade should be for this book. But the book itself in there was probably a 6 in my opinion because of the waves in there. And the case was junk because it was popped. And it just looked like it had natural warping to it. It didn't look like anyone pried it. There were no marks along the bottom or anything like that, like someone tried to get the book out. It was just a little bit open. It was not a nice seal. And that caused heat, I think, and moisture to get into the book and to affect the book and cause a wave inside the book. If I had taken this book out and sent it in for grading, I believe it would have got a 6, maybe even a 5.5 on a bad day. Now I think I could send it in and it would get a 7 or a 7.5. It's the same book. So buy the book, not the grade. That's what a lot of people will tell you, and I agree with them, and they agree with me. So there you go. Tick Special Edition. Hope you enjoyed this kind of long-winded explanation of this book. Very prideful to have this in my collection, and I'll be showing it off often. So hope y'all enjoyed that, and we'll catch you next time on BUB'S Comics. If you get a chance, crack one out. Read it. and then put it back in the slab. Thanks. Read a comic. Bye.